Welcome to Kendall Cooper Talk Mysteries. I'm Julie Cooper, a mystery and thriller writer, and half of the duo bringing you our regular podcast series, spotlighting mystery, suspense, and of course, thriller fiction. First, thanks again to my brother Chris Squires for our wonderful theme song, The Man in the Panama Hat. I'm just back from Thriller Fest in Manhattan, and with all this summer heat across the country, I feel like I need a good Panama hat right about now.
Hi, I'm Wendy Kendall, cozy mystery writer and co-host on this podcast. Our theme for this episode is inspired by a quote from our guest author's book titled Season of Sacrifice. This is the first book in the Maya Malik mystery series. The quote is, "Secrets are like jewels. You must protect them." Secrets are an integral component of mysteries. All secrets are interesting to the reader, but not all secrets lead you to solve the mystery. The talent in the reader is to discern the difference between the interesting and the clue. The talent in the author is to weave these jewels into the story, to arm their characters with ways to protect these jewels, and to arm their heroes with the ways to discover these jewels. Our exciting guest today is Bharti Kirchner, author of 11 books, 7 novels, 4 cookbooks, and countless short pieces published in magazines and newspapers. Besides her mystery novel, Season of Sacrifice, she also published her Promised Tulips short story in Seattle Noir, which is an anthology of mystery short stories. She's won numerous awards and honors associated with her writing and her cooking. Before becoming an author, Bharti worked as a systems engineer for IBM and as a systems manager for Bank of America in San Francisco. She's also worked as a computer systems consultant in Europe and other continents. She's a frequent speaker at writers' conferences, book festivals, and universities. Welcome, Bharti Kirchner. It's exciting to have you join us.
Thank you so much. I'm honored and delighted to be part of your excellent series.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Bharti, with all your success in writing incredible historical novels and family sagas, novels about India, and 4 delightful cookbooks, what intrigued you and spurred you to write mysteries?
Well, it happened in a roundabout way, and you actually have mentioned it. And that was my mystery short story for Seattle Noir, Promised Tulips. And that short story did really well. Publishers Weekly, in one of the reviews, chose it as one of the 2 best stories in the collection. And given that I have never written a mystery short story or mystery anything, that was really a good piece of information, good piece of news for me. Now, what happened was after that, it was also, my short story was selected for USA Noir, which is another anthology. It's an anthology of anthologies, all the Seattle Noir, Boston Noir, Portland Noir, other noirs combined, taking the best from. And at that point, my readers started asking me, so why don't you write more mysteries? And at first I said, no. I said, I don't know about mysteries. I don't know. I started making excuses. But then I thought, well, maybe I'll give this genre a try. And so my readers actually are responsible for this.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so glad that the readers contacted you and got you thinking about that. Well, in your Season of Sacrifice book, your private investigator, Maya Malik, when she's not busy tracking down a lead on her mystery, is very interested in nature, gardening, and health foods. In the old classic PI stories, the protagonist was mostly a loner who seemed to have no interest other than his cases. How important is it that a PI in a contemporary mystery have other interests and also people in their lives?
Well, it's very important because we live in a complex, globalized world where you have to be multidimensional in order to thrive in it. You also have to connect to people. Now, Maya already is familiar with the concept of this connectivity. She can relate to people in various communities in Seattle, such as the Tibetans, the Russians, the Bangladeshis, and of course, Indians. Ultimately, it's her people skills that help her do the investigation and solve the case.
That's interesting, just the idea of how the world has changed and gotten smaller in a way. I can
Yes.
see that now, the way you explain it. It's like the characters have to catch up to that.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think it no longer is true that, even as a writer, you can't just sit and write. You have to go out into the world, meet the people, and expose yourself to all sorts of things.
Wow, that's a really great point. I like that. You grew up in Kolkata, India, and now live yes, and now you live in the Pacific Northwest. The culture of India is such a charming dimension in your mysteries. Much of this cultural reference is through the delightful character Uma, who is Maya's mother. Can you talk to us a little bit about Uma and her relationship with her daughter?
Oh, I'd love to. Because Uma is popular not only with Maya's friends, she's popular with my readers. Now, she's a very loving mother and she listens, but she doesn't stand in the way of Maya doing what she wants to do. At the same time, she's very honest. She speaks honestly from her heart, but mostly it's her loving nature that Maya appreciates and cherishes. Now, this is what happened during my beta reading period. One of my readers, she really liked Uma. Now, at some point in the book, that is the end of Uma because the story continues, but she doesn't have any more role in it. But my beta reader said, why don't you have her after such and such page? I said, well, she's not needed here. Maybe she'll come back in another series, another book in the series. But my beta reader was upset, said, no, you have to bring her back. And I said, I can't do that. So this is how popular Uma is with my readers.
That's wonderful. Well, your characters are very passionate in their life pursuits and in their love relationships, and yet you're still able to keep the focus on the mystery. When you're writing, yes, it's intriguing to me because when you're writing this kind of intense emotion, how do you know how much is too much and you're able to keep from detracting from the element of mystery?
That is an extremely important point. And let me explain what I mean. Novels, especially mystery novels, are about balance. Now, by that I mean how much time and space do you dedicate to the character development as opposed to the plot development, or how much dialogue versus descriptive passages. Now, you will find that in classic novels or your favorite novels, a perfect balance between all these elements. And there is no formula to do it. And this is where I think techniques leave off and the art part of writing takes over. It's tricky. So what I do is once I'm done with a book, I usually let it rest for a while, and then I reread the whole thing, and many things jump out of it, one of them being a lack of balance.
Interesting. Well, there are also deep social questions at the heart of some of your characters' actions. In Season of Sacrifice, 2 young women horrifically set themselves on fire, protesting the Chinese occupation of Tibet. How do important social issues enhance the questions surrounding a mystery novel?
Well, a murder or any crime will affect the whole community. But if there are socio-political issues involved, the impact is much greater. For example, human trafficking, or in my case, the political freedom for Tibet. These issues affect the physical and mental health of the people, their future, sometimes even the economy of a country. And they give weight to the book. At the same time, it helps to draw attention of the readers to them. Readers feel like they have learned something, they have something to think about, and sometimes people even become involved in a particular issue because of having read about it in a book. Now, you can always read them in a nonfiction book, but I think fiction, being an experience, they put you right in that particular situation, and you feel it more.
Wow, that's really thoughtful. I love that. I can really see that. Well, regarding our theme about secrets, often the pursuit of the truth and the reveal of the secrets is portrayed as liberating, and the truth is beautiful. In Season of Sacrifice, the revelation of the truth behind secrets is not always pretty. I was especially impressed with your writing about the homeless man. He was referred to as the street poet named Arthur, who states some very interesting truths when he's talking with Maya. And here, just a short quote. "The homeless don't lie," she heard Arthur saying. "We don't have to put up a front." The truth that Arthur speaks is surrounded by the description of, quote, "the cloying odor of an unbathed body, face creased, hair wild and stingy, and so on. Stringy, and so on. Can you talk about writing characters' secrets and revealing ugly truths?
Oh, yes, love to. Because all characters have secrets, even if it's only their secret lies they're trying to keep hidden. And until you find it, you don't really know the character too well. Now, in this particular case, Arthur, who is homeless, he's free to say what he wants because he has nothing to protect. And this is one thing I realized when writing this book, is that homelessness is perhaps the biggest freedom one can have. And my observation here is that lies keep you stuck. Whenever you're facing the truth, even if it's ugly or painful, it gives you a certain freedom.
Well, your character Atticus, who's a friend of one of the victims and ends up hiring Maya to investigate his friend's death, is such an interesting character. Can you talk a little about him and his importance to this mystery?
Oh, yes, because I had fun writing him. He's eccentric. He has a sense of humor. He said things like, imagine an accountant losing his balance. And he hires Maya as an investigator, so he's crucial to the story, but it's not clear in the beginning why he's doing that. Now, he's bright and afraid, he's misunderstood, and he's a misfit, and he seems to be hiding lots of things. So in that sense, he's a good character. Now, he appears in the very first scene in the book, and he's there at the very end of the book. So he has a long character arc. But the interesting thing about him is that we don't figure him out completely until at the very end.
So true. That is very true about him. I know I didn't. Well, Bharti, we're delighted that you're going to treat us to a reading today. Oh, excuse me, there goes my voice. To a reading today. And what have you selected for your reading?
Well, I thought I'd read the first couple of pages of Season of Sacrifice, because that will sort of give people an idea what the book is about and set the mood.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Great.
Okay, so chapter 1. With the early morning summer breeze tickling the back of her neck, Maya Mallik hurried toward the neighborhood bakery for pastries and a jolt of caffeine. Her eyes took in the well-kept Tudors, Dutch colonials, craftsman bungalows, and occasional modern mansions that typified the Green Lake district of Seattle. Rounding the corner from half a block away, she spied a crowd of 10 or so people. Eyes closed and dressed in white, they overflowed the sidewalk in front of an imposing oyster gray house that loomed over the intersection. A rally of some sort? Her instinct as a private investigator demanded to know. Or a benefit event? No, they emitted a loud, harsh, and spooky chant in an unfamiliar tongue. Although she knew she had to get going, Maya approached and stood a respectful distance behind the group. With her white top and matching pants, she blended in. Nobody would notice her, or so she hoped. A petite young woman stepped forward from the group, turning briefly to face the crowd. All but her eyes were shielded by a dazzling white shroud. A garland of white lilies encircled her neck. Chest vibrating, arms linked, the group arranged itself around her in a tight semicircle and continued chanting. An olive-skinned man of medium height with a hat slanted across his forehead nudged the woman forward. He wore a white jacket and dark wraparound sunglasses, even though the sunlight was feeble. There was something sinister about him. Watch him, a feeling in the gut suggested. Maya stood on her toes and glanced at him, trying not to be obvious. The young woman sank to her knees, whispered a few words to Sunglasses Man, and sent him a longing look as he bent over her like an executioner. The chanting continued, the chorus ascending and then descending, sounding cruel and evil. A second woman came forward, pivoted, and faced the assembly. Taller than the first, she was also dressed in a white shroud with a similar garland around her neck. Maya saw only the woman's bright eyes above her veil, and those eyes looked familiar. They reminded her of Sylvie, a dedicated malaria research scientist and sister of Maya's best friend. Sylvia was adopted from a Tibetan refugee camp in India when she was still a baby. Her bloodline could be traced to a Tibetan royal family. But Sylvie, who didn't have a political bone, wouldn't come to a street rally. She'd rather be cooped up in her research lab for a 12-hour day. And yet, Maya's chest tightened. She called out, "Sylvie?" The chanting stopped for an anxious moment.
Oh, such great foreshadowing and foreboding, and that just completely creeped me out. I just can't wait to see what happens next. Thank you for that.
I've got the chills too. I love that
reading. Oh my goodness. Well, Bharti, I know you spent many years working in the tech industry with computer systems, both here in the U.S. and overseas, something that I think of as a left-brained endeavor. And neurology, which is one of my favorite topics, neurologists say that typically artists and writers operate out of their right brains, considered the more creative and intuitive side. How much of a creative stretch was it for you to move from something so analytical to such a lyrical and emotional undertaking as writing?
Well, thank you for asking, because it was quite a bit of stretch. But what helped me in the long run was that I have always read a lot. And I had a strong imagination, and both of those things helped. My guess is that I'm both left and right-brained, and perhaps we are all a combination of the two in different proportions. But also, I made the transition in a certain way. I didn't go from computer engineering to writing emotional novels. I made my intermediate step was writing cookbooks, which are sort of step-by-step, methodical, and not like, computer engineering. So that transition really helped me. And only much later, when I felt prepared, that I started writing fiction. Now, when I teach classes, writing classes, I often get Boeing engineers and Microsoft engineers in my class, and they are all so eager to get into writing novels. They ask me, they said, "How do I make the transition?" I said, "I couldn't tell you. You just have to do it. I can't give you any methodology. I can't give you any formula. You just have to do it."
Good advice. And I never thought about writing cookbooks as a bridge, but as a transition, but I can see that it certainly worked for you.
Yes.
Now, I've just finished Tulip Season, which is a Mitra Basu mystery, a story with lots of twists and turns. It's another case of the secrets that your characters keep, which grow and turn monstrous, building suspense along the way. There are at least several characters in your novel who have a shadow side, which is only slowly revealed. I have to admit to having some frustration with Mitra. Why is she so trusting, even though she's the very observant amateur sleuth in the story?
Well, it has to do with her growing up in a trusting environment. And she grew up in India in a very small, in a family. She was the only child. So it was a little bit different, but this over trusting that she has as a character trait, it ends up really being a character flaw.
Interesting. And yet that's the thing that I find both frustrating and most relatable about her, and the thing I love about her as a character. Now, there's a scene in Tulip Season where Mitra is searching for a relative, looking for clues, and she speaks to someone who's trying to help her. The character Sabnam says, "Remember what Deep Throat said?" referring to the film All the President's Men. "Follow the money." Sabnam laughs sarcastically. I say, "Follow the love. Love takes you to more troubled spots." This remark proves to be very useful advice, something Mitra should have listened to more carefully. Any tips for our mystery writers and listeners on the foreshadowing technique?
Yes, very much so. I don't do a lot of foreshadowing, but if I do, I am careful because foreshadowing in a modern novel works only if it's not too heavy-handed, it's not too obvious. In Tulip Season, Sabnam is a minor character who appears in only a few pages. So it's easy for the readers not to pay too much attention to her. The reader might vaguely notice the statement, "Follow the love," but begin to get at the truth of that only much, much later. And Mitra, as an amateur detective, she herself fails to act on that in time, but it's her human frailty.
Good point. Good point. And it's what makes, I think, the narrative throughout that novel so riveting. Now, I know you've also written 4 cookbooks in addition to your mysteries. Food and cooking are such vital parts of your mystery writing, and it serves to seamlessly inform the reader about aspects of the Indian culture. I'm wondering, might there be an Indian chef in one of your next novels?
Oh, probably not, or I would have done so earlier.
Darn.
Because with the mystery series, you set a certain tone in the first of the book, and then you have to maintain that tone. So I don't think I'll have a chef in one of these novels, no.
All right. Well, restraint is a good part of good writing, certainly. And my next question is, what is on the writing schedule or the horizon for you? Are there more mysteries that our listeners can look forward to from you?
Oh, absolutely. I am just delighted that I'm writing mystery novels. They're so much fun. I mean, they're very hard work, but my next novel in the series will be called Seasonal Disorder.
Ah.
And seasonal disorder it comes from that word sad, which is in Pacific Northwest. It's a common word, seasonal affected disorder. And a lot of people have it, that disorder. But anyway, it's set in a remote island in the Indian Ocean, and I'm having fun now completing it.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Well, we'll definitely look forward to that. And I'm going to launch right into my segment, which I'll keep brief today, and it's titled Why We Read. I talked in a previous podcast about why we write and delved deeper into that topic with David Morrell in a past interview. I recently came across a quote that made me think more about why we read, and I decided to hijack it for today's segment. The late Pablo Picasso said it first. He was actually speaking about art, which I'm changing to fiction. And the quote is, "The purpose of fiction is to wash the dust of daily life off our souls." Fiction can be an escape, a view into an unexplored world or culture, as Bharti has done with her books, or just a pure pleasure. Thomas Merton said, and again he was speaking of art, which I've changed handily to fiction, "Fiction enables us to find ourselves and lose ourselves at the same time." This pleasure of reading is something that should be shared with friends, family, and especially children. If you can donate books to a library, a summer reading program, a center for foster kids, or a homeless shelter, do it. I hope this summer is filled with many reasons for you to pick up a good book. Over to you, Wendy.
Great. Thank you, Julie. Well, for my segment, I'm going to explore what a tangled web is weaved when a character practices to deceive. Internal conflict builds tension and suspense in a mystery, as it builds pressure within a character, especially one who's lying. They will struggle to keep that lie as a facade of truth to the other characters. These characters may be devious, and these characters most certainly have high stakes with something that's important to them to lose if the truth comes out. Sometimes the author will also struggle to keep the lie as an accepted truth by the reader. Some of these lies, written by the author, are to try and steer the reader's conclusions, and some are from what's known as an unreliable narrator. It's up to the reader to try and determine how reliable the narrator, as well as each of the other characters, is. People are emotional beings, and often their lies are reactionary and are difficult for the character to maintain. Confessions will then ensue. These confessions may not have anything to do with the mystery. Maybe the character's trying to hide that they're having an affair with a married person, for example, and fears the impact to the marriage or to their reputation. This may have nothing to do with the sleuth's mystery investigation. Other lies are cold and calculated and attempts at perfect logic. These are the lies that are the most difficult and, in my mind, test the strength of the author's writing. These are the lies that characters design in order to try and get away with the perfect crime. The myth of the perfect crime is what criminal characters strive to execute and what readers strive to foil. This is a colloquial term used in law and fiction to characterize crimes that are undetected or unattributed to an identifiable perpetrator, or otherwise unsolved or unsolvable as a kind of technical achievement on the part of the criminal. The perfect crime is distinguished from one that has merely not been solved yet, or where everyday chance or procedural matters frustrate a conviction. The perfect crime goes unsolved not because of incompetence in the investigation, but because of the cleverness and skill of the criminal. It's the author's challenge to the readers to find a way through the tangled web of deceit and determine the fictional truth, whether pretty or ugly. And mystery fans thrill to that challenge. Well, in every episode, we like to recommend some sort of mystery or that could be any kind of media, whether book or film or anything else. And today, in addition to Bharti's beautiful books, I'm recommending a book titled White Lies by Jeremy Bates. You never know where a lie will lead. While driving to her new job teaching high school English, Katrina Burton picks up a young hitchhiker who turns out to be a drunken creep. She's headed to the Cascade Mountains of eastern Washington. Because she's fearful for her safety, she lies about her destination so that she can get this creep out of her car. Later, she finds out that he is also a teacher at the same school. And then later, Katrina meets Jack Reeves, who's good-looking, charismatic, and strong. She falls for him and hopes he can help her extricate herself from her growing web of lies. Then Jack lands himself in the middle of a grisly murder. Now Katrina must decide whether to turn him in, whether people will even believe her, or should she tell yet another lie. Also, I wanted to mention, in celebration of chefs like Bharti who love mystery, I want to mention my recent discovery that the late Anthony Bourdain very much enjoyed mystery, especially noir. His first book, published in 1995, was titled Bone in the Throat, a novel of death and digestion.
That's good. And that sounds like so Tony. The title's perfect.
Well, that was followed by 2 more crime novels titled Gone Bamboo and The Bobby Gold Stories, which was released in the United States in 2003. He listed among his favorite authors Elmore Leonard, John le Carré, and Ross MacDonald, and his favorite crime novel of all time by George V. Higgins, The Friends of Eddie Coyle. This favorite is interesting because the book is all dialogue-driven and reads almost like an FBI wiretap transcript. I'm looking forward to reading these and wanted to share this discovery with you. Bharti, besides being an award-winning author, you're also a freelance book reviewer for the Seattle Times. What would you like to recommend to our listeners?
Okay, well, I would recommend an author, Jacqueline Winspear. And she's a British author who now lives in the U.S. and who writes the Maisie Dobbs series. And in these novels, she explores the period after World War I. Maisie Dobbs happens to be an investigator in England, but she has worked as a maid for a wealthy British family. So she knows the ways of the wealthy, and so it's an interesting contrast. And one of my favorite titles in her series is called A Dangerous Place, and it's set in the Rock of Gibraltar.
That's great recommendation. Thank you. I
Thank
love
you.
that author.
We both just adore her books. Absolutely love her work. Thank you for that. Well, I'm going to give a brief recap of a day-long workshop I attended about 2 weeks back, sponsored by the Mystery Writers of America. The name of the program was Mystery Writing, the Long and Short of It, and it featured Eric Witchey, a renowned short story writer, and the New York Times bestselling author, Jeffrey Deaver, who's also the current national president for Mystery Writers of America. Most people believe that writing a short story is much easier than writing a full-length novel, and nothing could be farther from the truth. With a short story, you have no words to waste. Every decision you put into sentences must be there for a reason. Eric said, when you lose real estate, he's talking about the abbreviated length of short stories, you must increase the inference for the reader. In other words, you must use just the right words to help the reader complete the thought or feeling in their brain, that unspoken thing hinted at or inferred by what you've just written. It's a big challenge, to be sure, and one that can make a lasting impact on a reader. You can find Eric on the web at www.eric, that's E-R-I-C, Witchey, WITCHEY.com. Jeffrey Deaver gave us some key insights into his creative process and told us how he manages to turn out bestseller after bestseller year after year. A lot of it is discipline because he's a prodigious outliner, much like Elizabeth George. I was pleased to hear him stress the importance of knowing your craft, getting the prose, grammar, and punctuation down first, and learning as much about the publishing industry as you can. He was very clear. Use of an outline prevents pain down the road. And I've got to say, he and Elizabeth George have made a convert of me. I've been using an outline on a historical novel, and it's a lot less agony for me as a writer. So if you ever have the opportunity to hear him speak, be sure to do it. His website is www.jeffrey, and it's spelled not like you think, it's spelled JEFFERYDEAVER.com. And I'm just back from a week at Thriller Fest in New York City, so I'll have a summary for one of our next podcasts. In closing, our special thanks to an expert storyteller, writing advocate, and cultural raconteur, Bharti Kirchner, for spending time with us today. We're so delighted you could join us. Based on all the food described in your books, I'm going to ask you for some Indian restaurant recommendations in the Seattle area and plan a field trip, maybe with my partner in crime, Wendy.
Oh, yeah.
In the meantime,
Bharti, where are you going to send us?
And keep writing.
I am delighted to do this. First of all, thank you very much for this interview. This is just wonderful for me. And let me tell you about a couple of places in this greater Seattle area.
Great.
One is called Mayuri Food and Video. Now, ignore the video part, go for the food. And it is, Mayuri is spelled as Mayuri, and it's in the Redmond area of greater Seattle area. And why is it such a favorite of mine is because besides usual Indian food, it has chaat, which is the Indian street food, and that's really different from anything you probably have had, and Indian sweets. And many of my friends have converted, they have become big converts to Indian sweets. So those are the two reasons. They also have Indian Chinese food. Now, this is something you may not have had. This is a Chinese food cooked with Indian spices. It's very popular in India, actually. I grew up in Calcutta, where there's a big Chinatown. And people would not believe this, but a lot of Chinese live in India, they've lived their whole lives there. So there's such a thing called Indian Chinese food. One other restaurant I'll recommend is called Udupi Cafe. Udupi is spelled as Udupi Cafe, and it's a vegetarian Indian restaurant. It's also in Redmond, and you can find these addresses very easily from the internet. And it's also they also have lunch buffets, and you can try many different things in their buffet lunches. So I highly recommend that you go and try and have fun and think about me when you are eating.
We definitely will.
I'm so excited. I wrote them both down. I'm planning when I can get there.
Yes. Thank you both so much.
Thank you. It was our complete pleasure.